Everyone. Welcome to our PatternFly demo. We'll go ahead and jump right in here today. You can find this recording on our YouTube channel if you want to share it out. That's linked in our agenda. And just a reminder, if in case you haven't seen the invites that have gone out, this meeting will now be hosted every 3 weeks. And this is to accommodate our new sprint schedule. So we'll still be having our demos every 3 weeks. We hope that you'll join us for those. We also have a link to the forum. I always give it a shout out for every demo in our agenda. If you have any questions today, please go ahead and post on the forum and get the conversation started. We have a really active community there, and our team is really active there as well. So we love to answer any questions on the forum that may come up should they need more conversation past the day. All right, to get us started on the core side, Matt Nolting is going to cover the data toolbar component and the overflow menu component. All right, I think Matt may have to rejoin us. I think he's trying to resolve some technical issues right now. I'm going to move on. Oh, hi, Matt. Okay. Hey, Matt, we can't hear you quite yet. So I'm going to move on to.
Got it.
Hi. Hi.
Hey.
And then I'll ask if you wouldn't mind for everyone else on the call muting your mic. And we'll continue. Kendall, do you mind muting your mic? Thank you so much. That cleared it up for us. Thank you. Okay, Matt, feel free to continue.
Hey. So I have two experimental features demo today. The first being the data toolbar, which much like the original version of just the toolbar, relies on groups and items with the default spacing applied to each of those. Each of those has its own custom variable, which can be updated and applies to a base spacer variable, which is 16 pixels. So everything in the toolbar by default gets 16 pixels of spacing. Basic data toolbar types is bulk select, overflow menu, pagination, search filters. So those modifiers get applied to data toolbar items, and those modifiers adjust the spacing for them according to design. A couple utility type modifiers are hidden and visible, whatever breakpoint you like, as well as a line right or a line left. And here's an example of data toolbar items and groups living side by side. So groups are nestable inside of groups. And they function just the way you would expect them inside the content. An option for a separator, which I think maybe we will choose to replace later with a divider, but that's something that we're actively investigating. Spacers for items and groups. They apply to items or groups. Our spacer none, which is 0, small, medium, large, on breakpoints, medium, large, XL, and then space items, none, small, medium, large, on medium, large, and XL breakpoints. Space items applies to anything that's a group, and then spacer applies to either an item or a group. And here are examples of those. Group types filter groups, icon button groups, and button groups. Here, each of those has a unique base or value applied to the items within. Toggle group modifier. So toggle group modifier is some functionality built into the toolbar that allows for filters to be hidden as spaces at a premium. So shrink this down. All those filters within the toggle group collapse into then a toggle button. At the breakpoint, you choose medium, large, or XL, they become visible again. And there's an example down here of what that looks like. And kind of putting all the pieces together. So the filters that would normally be up here in the content are visible down here in the expanded content. So you have an input group, status selected options for both status and risk. And then as you scale your viewport up and you hit that breakpoint, your chip groups are still visible in the expanded content, but the filters no longer are. And this is an example of just stacking content in the toolbar. So you can just stack and stack and stack until design probably would not prefer that, but you have the ability to stack these until your toolbar contains all the functionality you need. So you can also use dividers within your toolbar and lays out as expected. And I think that covers the toolbar. Any questions about the toolbar? No? Can you still hear me?
Oh yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so that's toolbar. And the overflow menu was a pattern that we noticed in cross designs, specifically in toolbar, but could be used in other places like a card header or a title. It basically just takes a group of items and condenses those into one action, specifically a drop down. So this is an example of that, and it has basically the same structure without all the functionality as the toolbar. Again, it's based on groups and items, but it's not necessary to use groups or nearly as important as using groups. But if you were to use a group and have different types of items, you can do that with the overflow menu. And just here's an example of the group types. Again, consistent with the toolbar group types. Being overflow menu group, and then you have a button group and an icon button group. And here's an example of how these behave. When you hit your prescribed breakpoint. So all those actions are then, all these actions are then added to the drop-down menu. Primary action, secondary, tertiary. Here's an example of a persistent action within an overflow menu group, where you would have one button remaining persistent, all the others hidden and added to the drop-down. That one's pretty straightforward. Yeah, any questions?
Great, thanks so much, Matt. Cool PatternFly shirt, by the way. Okay, and
Isn't
then
it?
Michael. Yeah, we got to represent on demo day. Okay, and moving right along to Michael Coker, who's going to cover select disabled variation.
Share my screen. Okay, can you see this now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. This one was actually contributed by Boaz, a regular contributor to Patternfly, and it should be quick. It's just a simple enhancement to our existing custom select component. It was to add a disabled state, and so for the core component, the variation name is the same as any of our other menus that behave similarly, with a disabled, a PFM disabled class that you use on the component to give it this disabled styling. And this will also, if you inspect the element, any interactive form control elements inside of it would also be set to the disabled state for that type of element. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great, thanks so much, Michael. Moving on to React, Dan's going to cover bullet chart and our donut utilization chart.
Yeah, just let me share my screen. All right, hopefully you can see this. This is the bullet chart. So several variations with the PatternFly design on PatternFly.org. So just go through them one by one. The first one is a simple bullet chart. Basically, just has a this middle bar here is called a segmented or primary measure. You can see down here, this is actually the segmented version. We have tooltips on each. We have tooltips on the range, tooltips on the warning. There is also an error that's supported. Something that I've been doing with the charts is that legends and charts are typically separate, but typically users want to embed the legend and the chart in the same SVG. So this is all SVG here. This is all an image. So the text label, the legends, this is all just one SVG. So this third one down here, this is a responsive example. Not all of these chart examples are responsive except for this one, but you can see that it kind of changes size when it's meant to take up 100% of its container, and you'll see the legends start wrapping at a certain point. So the next thing that I did here was, this is another version. It's a bullet chart with a primary measured dot. It's basically a, what do they call these things? It's another type of chart other than the bullet chart. Down below we have different variations on themes. So you could have a green bullet chart, a yellow or gold bullet chart. We have the ability to show negative primary measures. So in the PatternFly design, the spec says to show, when negative measures are considered bad, show them with a red color scale. If those negative measures are considered good, then you could actually reverse the bullet chart. So here you see the color scales are reversed, the range is reversed. So different scenarios for whatever your needs are. Down below, you can have more than one negative measure, just like you can have more than one primary measure. So we have just added this red color scale just for the bullet chart, similar to the color scale that we already have in PatternFly Core. We use it in PatternFly 3 as well. So we have the ability to, those examples are obviously horizontal. We have the ability to show these bullet charts vertically. So these are just more examples of how they look vertically and how the tooltips change. The PatternFly pattern is the center, the legend underneath. Obviously, scale up, like I have the ability, you know, like for cost management, especially for this here, I've left aligned the label and the legend. But typically the pattern is to center the legend underneath the chart. You can right align the legend. So there's a couple of options depending on what your product needs are. We can definitely change the size of the bullet chart. This is just showing an example of how everything scales properly when you change the size of well, essentially these are bars. They're bars laid on top of each other, and they're ordered in a certain way to, so that the smallest or the largest is behind one another and they stack properly. So moving on, we have a horizontal bullet chart group, vertical bullet chart group. So again, this is all one SVG, and the same example with a group title, group and subtitle. So again, the label, the horizontal divider, each one of these bullet charts, the labels, the legends is all one SVG. So that pretty much covers bullet chart. One thing that I didn't show, this donut utilization. This has actually been in the charts package for a few weeks, but for some reason never got to demo it. So basically, this is similar to the bullet chart. In bullet chart we're using multiple bar charts overlaid on each other. This is actually a pie chart. We're using multiple pie charts to get let's move down here. So you can see that this is a donut utilization with a threshold. So these are basically two pie charts laid on top of each other. And the difference between a donut and a pie chart is simply that there's an inner and outer radius. So if you change the inner radius of a pie chart, you can make it into a donut chart. So basically, you're just kind of moving, you're clearing the center of the pie chart to create a donut chart. So back up here, we're showing examples of how a utilization chart would progress through different values. And here, just below that, you can see the inverted donut utilization chart. So, in situations where you want to count down, we're actually showing the inverse. Instead of danger being at the 90 percentile range, we're showing danger at 10 or 20%. I forget what it is. Yeah, 20%. So it's just the inverse. Similar to the donut chart, we have the inverse there. We have the inverse here. And similar to the bullet chart, we have these legends are embedded with the SVG. We have the ability to show them on the bottom, centered. You can stack, or basically you're changing the up here. You can see the legends. There's one item per row. We have that ability. Here down here we have this green donut chart. This themed. We can show blue, green, yellow, whatever theme you want. But basically what I'm showing here is that you have the ability to show the legend centered underneath the donut chart, but instead of showing the legend horizontally with just one item per row, you can stack it and show it like that. These are just more examples of showing smaller utilization charts, just to make sure everything scales properly. We had the ability to show text inside the center of the chart, and if there's not enough room for that label, you can actually move it to the left, or to the right, or actually underneath in some cases. We had a couple scenarios we needed that, and that's about it. Unless anybody has any questions, I'll stop sharing my screen.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
For your tooltips, are you using the tooltip component, or is that something else?
No, these are Victory tooltips because it's an SVG. We don't really have the ability to use the PatternFly tooltip component.
Got it.
It's one thing about these charts. These examples aren't shown with padding, so necessarily you see there's a the tooltip shows up on this side, but on this side, you have to give the chart enough padding to accommodate the tooltip. So,
Ah,
although there isn't a lot of space here for this example, I probably should have added like 50 pixels of padding or something just to give the tooltips enough room. And there are tooltip enhancements coming from Victory in the next major release. So, we will or they will take these tooltips and kind of switch them around so they're constrained within the boundaries of the charts. So maybe these tooltips will appear on the inside of the chart instead of on the outside, where space is at a premium. So that's coming.
thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Dan. Next, Katie's going to cover flag updates to select and pagination components.
All right, let me just share my screen. All right, so first off, we've got to select the disabled flag, which Michael Coker mentioned earlier, so that got added into Core and React this time. So I'll pull up the surge. We did a little bit different for the examples just because there's getting to be a lot of different select examples. So now you can actually toggle the state for these particular flags that I've added. You can so disabled for both of the different type of heads. You can't click on it anymore. Pretty easy to see there. And then secondly, I also added the direction flag to select. So this is, let me not toggle it to be disabled, but normally if you expand it down, it defaults and just goes down, but you can also now change that to make it expand up, which maybe this wasn't the best example to put this on because it kind of disappears beneath the thing. So when it's at the bottom of the page, you can make it now expand upwards so it doesn't get cut off. And then I also added the disabled flag for the pagination component. So similarly to select, you can now disable the entire component. You see the example right here. You can't click on any of the buttons and all of the menus are locked. And that about sums it up for the visual stories I worked on. I also want to highlight some of the bug fixes, drop downs, on selects now properly passes by its event. And the drop-down items now have the correct styling along with the icon type. And table now has a new 2XL breakpoint. And that's it for me.
Great, thanks, Katie. And Jenny?
Hello, let me just share my screen too. All right. So for this sprint, I've been working, the first thing I've been doing was adding tables to React integration tests. So I pretty much added a bunch of demos for all of those table use cases, and I've been writing a bunch of Cypress tests for those demos as well, just to make sure everything works and we're not really running into any unprecedented type errors. But I have run into a few. So it's a good way to figure that out and fix some things. And Patrick Riley has been really helpful with that. And this PR is actually getting really close. I'm going to check the branch out later this afternoon and run some more tests on it just to see if everything's running correctly. And then hopefully I'll be able to, put it up. And like the integration build is failing for this most recent PR. So after Patrick has helped me solve this type error, this should clear that up. So I'll be working on that. I've also been working on this. So this is a pretty simple fix. The issue is that the login form, the username field, was not being autofocused when you open the login form. So React has a built-in autofocus prop that lets you autofocus a text input. So I just added that prop to this. And this is a pretty easy PR, so needs a couple of reviews still. But yeah, if anyone has some time to take a look, that would be great. I've also been working on chip group. So I added a new prop to allow chip group to be initially expanded. You can see it here. It's just the default is open prop. So now chip group can have a setting where it's open on default. That's that. And then the last thing is that I added an is required prop to the form select component. which, as you can see here, this form component here, every time you set the is required prop to true, it should have a little red asterisk next to the form field. So that wasn't showing up for this, for example, but after making this fix, that should now work as expected. And yeah, that is it for me.
Great, thanks, Jenny. And moving on to Yakima with a variety of updates as well.
Yes, hi. Okay. So first of all, for the React workspace, I added some Markdown components. This was just a low-hanging fruit. So with that, we can render our Markdown text a little bit better, because this plays into the next issue that I fixed, which was to make the page layout demos in our workspace take up 100% height. And also for that purpose, I added a paragraph here telling the consumers that if they also want their page layout to take up 100% height, they might have to set 100% height on all of the ancestors leading up to that page component. So if I open this up, you can now see it takes up the full height. So that's that. Next, there was somebody on somebody on Slack had a question about attaching a modal to any type of container. So I was helping that person out a bit, and I have some local changes. But essentially, if these changes were to go through, I updated the examples here locally. But for example, by default, when you attach a modal, attaches it as a child directly under your document body. So you can see here, if I open this up, the div is right here. So this is the modal div right under body. But in this example, the target is actually set to the element with ID Gatsby, and it's targeting the inner div. So now if I click on this example, you can see that the modal was attached to a different container, like right here. And finally, just one more example, I added like a little iframe space up here, and you can also target the iframe. And of course, the iframe doesn't have its own style sheet, the PatternFly style sheet attached to it. That's why it doesn't show up. But you can see that it was able to insert the content onto the iframe as well. So this just gives the flexibility for the modal to be placed anywhere, wherever the consumer needs it to be. Next, there were a bunch of tooltip and also popover improvements. They share the same underlying component, but I can show here. So first of all, when you take a look at the tooltip, by default, it now considers its boundary to be the whole window instead of just before it was the scroll parent. Let me show you. So you can see right now that the tooltip extends over into the sidebar area, just on top of the window. Before, the boundary was set to scroll parent. So if I just update the example here, you can see that in this case, it considers the scrolling container to be its boundary. So you can still make that change if you want it to be, but the default now is window. Another improvement you can see right now is if the boundary is set to scroll parent, or if the boundary on a tooltip is pushing the tooltip a little bit into a direction, before the arrow on the tooltip was always centered. So if the tooltip did get pushed a little bit, it was very possible that the arrow was not pointing at its attached node anymore. But now the arrow is positioning aware, and it'll continue to point to the correct node even if it gets pushed a little bit. The next improvement for tooltips and popovers is that we added a flip behavior prop. And this flip behavior prop basically tells the tooltip that, if it runs out of space at the top, where should it go to next? And you can see I just pasted the default here. So it tries to lay it out first at the top. If it doesn't have space at the top, it goes to the right, and then to the bottom. So it kind of goes clockwise. So you can see here, if I scroll up, and now I'm out of space at the top, it goes to the right. But of course, you can easily change this. If you were to change this from right to left, you can see that since I'm out of space at the top, it prefers to now go to the left instead. So you can modify how you want this tooltip to behave if you run out of space. And instead of passing in an array in, you can also do the old behavior, which was just setting it simply to flip. So that's still an option this way. By default, we show the tooltip towards the top. If it runs out of space, it'll flip to the bottom. So this is a more simple use case. Also add an example here how you can show a tooltip on an icon. I think that was mostly it for. There were a couple more improvements. Also, the CSS was fixed. So if you're a consumer and you didn't see any animations for popovers or tooltips before, definitely get the latest version. Now you should see the animations properly. And that was it for the React stuff. If there are no more questions, if there are no questions, I would go into the website section. Okay. So just real quick for the website. Oh, can you see this window too? I added linting support for the website. If you check out, if you build a website right now, you'll probably get a lot of warnings. That's because there's still some linting issues that haven't been fixed yet, but they're only warnings. They won't prevent you from making a build or pushing it because strict is turned off right now. But this is just to start to improve the code quality for the website. And finally, for the website itself, I added this get in touch page. Pretty simple. It just adds another tab item up here with some information on how to get in touch with us. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Yakima. And Jesse's going to cover accessibility on the website.
Everyone, let me share my screen here. See if I can. Can you see this? Okay.
Yes,
so okay. So last demo, I talked about how ID attribute values should be unique. In this demo, I really wanted to talk about valid values and also heading levels. So we recently focused on some valid values that we found to be an issue with an accordion, clipboard copy, and data list. This PR to address that. And essentially, the values must be spelled correctly and correspond to values that make sense for a particular attribute to perform the accessibility function that it was intended for. So many ARIA attributes accept a specific set of values. Allowed values, acceptable undefined values, acceptable default values are required. And there is a website that I thought was really good for kind of showing you the value types that you should be considering when looking at these valid values. An invalid ARIA attribute value may prevent the screen reader properly understanding the current state of a widget, and this could make the page unusable to users who rely on screen readers. So we made sure to focus on that and make sure that was fixed for this. Then also, we noticed there were some header issues within empty state and breadcrumb, and the fact that heading levels should only increase by 1. And the reason for this is the underlying purpose of headers is to convey the structure of a page, and while text size might help sighted users, it doesn't really help users of screen readers because a screen reader identifies a header only if it's properly marked up. So as you can see, it's supposed to show the structure. Users of screen readers can figure out the structure by navigating through headings. When handling heading elements are applied correctly, the page becomes much easier to navigate for screen readers and sighted users alike, and can save time and frustration for all of our users. So in summary, headings should be brief, clear, unique, and marked with H1 through H6 elements applied in hierarchical order. And in addition to making the page more accessible, headings have other benefits since search engines use headings when filtering, ordering, and displaying results. And improving the accessibility of your site can also have the effect of making your page more findable. So those are the 2 accessibility issues that we made sure to focus on this last sprint. That's it for me.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. That was the end of our agenda, but I see, okay, I see that Kendall's question was addressed in the chat. That's great. Any other questions more on that? Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. Again, I'll see you in 3 weeks' time, and you can find this recording on YouTube if you want to share it out. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.